The Florida State Seminoles have a big talent advantage against Virginia. I guess the question will be, is there going to be any let up in Florida State? Because this could be a trap game tonight.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, and it is a game night in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and it's a better matchup than you usually get on a Friday night in college football. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda. Move and be moved. He is Kenton Gibbs, former NC State defensive lineman, co-host of Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno, host of Locked On Canes. On this episode, we'll talk about a possible scenario at the end of the year where the committee better let 3 ACC teams in. I know that they're going to try to do whatever they can not to do that. We'll talk about the biggest Week 5 games, including Kenton tonight in Charlottesville, Virginia. Florida State Seminoles, ranked number 8, are kind of surprisingly to me only 6.5-point favorites at the Virginia Cavaliers. And, I mentioned Florida State has the talent advantage. Florida State's offense, especially their rushing offense, has been elite so far. I know they played a couple of cupcakes, but they also beat the Alabama Crimson Tide in a big upset opening weekend. Virginia's offense has been super balanced, and they've been scoring points for fun. I worry about Virginia's defense, Kenton. Do you think the Cavaliers, who are at home on a Friday night, could be a trap? Can Virginia pull off an upset?
Absolutely, this could be a trap game for Florida State. This is what I mean when I said this game was going to test their attitude. This game was going to test what type of attitude do you come into this game with in terms of, hey, we've arrived, or, hey, we're still chasing. We're still hungry. I think that they're good enough to kind of walk through the first 2 quarters with a we arrived attitude and then make up for it in the back half, but I don't think they'll cover in that scenario. And I think you put yourself at risk of losing a game that, objectively speaking, you have a lot more talent than Virginia. But when I look at this game, I say Virginia's at home. And obviously, some people say, oh, that's not the toughest road environment to be in. It's not about how tough a road environment to be in. The biggest difference between home games and away games in college football is your routine, is how you get into all of your stuff. That's more important. Even when the stadiums were empty, road teams did not perform exponentially better during the COVID year than they did before that or after that. Why? Because it's not about 9 times out of 10, it's not about the fans going that crazy. Some stadiums do have that type of environment that's so hectic. It is a little bit different, but for the most part, it's just about getting into your routine, doing what you're supposed to do, being in a place you're familiar with. You know where that divot is on the field where you're like, oh, I need to avoid that if I get close to it. You know where everything is and how everything feels. So I would say Florida State, if they come out with the attitude of we're going to dominate because we have proven nothing. We have done nothing. The whole world was laughing at us. Everybody wanted to make February 10th our official date because we went 2-10. Everybody hated us. Everybody pointed at us and said, oh, y'all are terrible. Then I'd be like, okay, this Florida State team is up to something. But if they seem to be too relaxed, if they seem to kind of sleepwalk through and think, oh, we're here, so we should win this game, that brings a very different set of emotions for me when watching this team.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not expecting them to sleepwalk. I know it's a possibility, especially knowing they have Miami the following week. But if anything, everybody on that roster, even the guys who transferred in, like Tommy Castellanos, like they know this team went 2-10 last year. I don't think they take that for granted. So key players on both sides. For Virginia, who's, off to a nice 3-1 start. I know Tony Elliott was like one of the coaches we had on the hot seat heading into the year. So far, so good for him. And Chandler Morris, this is the 4th different program he's been in as a quarterback, but he was originally recruited by Lincoln Riley. So at least like out of high school, that was a quarterback that got Lincoln Riley's attention. And Chandler Morris is off to a great start for the Hoos. He's got 1,050 passing yards, 8 touchdowns to 1 interception. I like that Virginia's offense has been balanced so far because they also have one of the leading rushers in the ACC, Jamar Taylor, with 298 rushing yards so far. But again, it's on the defensive side. I think Virginia and Florida State's defense is not going to give up anything crazy, in my opinion. But I think Virginia is going to score some points at home. But I think they're going to give up a lot more than they score. This is a team that they gave up 35 points to your NC State Wolfpack, and their one loss of the year, 35-31. They beat Stanford last week, but they did give up a couple big plays to Stanford and gave up 20 points to Stanford. So I'm a little bit worried about what Florida State is going to do to them. And on the Florida State side, obviously Castellanos is a guy who can hurt you in multiple different ways. Really dynamic runner from the quarterback position. Has also been really good on his deep balls so far this year. That's been something to watch, explosive plays. And, Mekhi Danzy, the wide receiver for Florida, who's leading their team in rushing so far, one of the fastest players in college football, Kenton. And, we'll see how many creative ways they find to get Danzy the football. They're expecting Squirrel White to be back for this game. He had been injured recently. They also, from what I understand, Castellanos is 100% or close to it. He got a little bit banged up in their Kent State game, but I think he's all right. So those are some of the players to look for on both sides.
I'll say this, right? When you talk about Florida State and how they've looked amazing offensively, it starts with the fact that Castellanos is a Malzahn fit to the T.
Yeah.
You think about Gus Malzahn's best year as an offensive coordinator ever. Who was the quarterback? One Cameron Newton.
Cam Newton.
Right? And what was Cam Newton best at? He could do everything. He was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. But what was it that they said, this is his superpower? Nobody else can do this at the quarterback position. Use his legs as an efficient runner, right? Why is Castellanos getting so good with the deep ball? It's the butterfly effect. It's that moment or snowball effect, rather. It starts downhill with we're running for 4 or 5 yards a pop. This is good. I like this. Then your quarterback gets comfortable. He gets set in. He hits a couple underneath, and he starts to get a little confidence. We can run it where we want to run it. We can throw it where we want to throw it. Let's try throwing it deep. I feel confident now. Now the defense is pulling up because they're saying, hey, we got to come out of too high. They're running the ball. We need that extra body in the box. Now you got a single high. Now you've got extras in the box. And now they're saying, got them. Ladies and gentlemen, we got them. We're going deep. Let's throw it over their heads now. So Thomas Castellanos has been a perfect fit for this offense. Gus Malzahn has done a hell of a job. This offensive line, they need all the credit in the world because it's not just Malzahn's system. The big fellas got to be big fellas. Big men must lead in a Malzahn system, and they have. They have been. This offensive line has been absolutely mauling folks, including the Alabama Crimson Tide. So I give them all of their credit for that. My only thing about this game that I say this could be tricky and sticky is this has all of the elements of a trap game.
Yeah.
Top 10 team on the road, unranked team, coach on the hot seat, additional, and you're playing a rival that is ranked in the top 5 the week after. Donno, that checks off 5 of 5 boxes for a trap game. So,
and it's Florida State's first road game, and they're coming off a bye week, which can sometimes be weird.
You got 7 keys now. You got 7 markers of a trap game, and I normally only go with 4 to 5, and yet you have 7 markers that you can look at and say, "Hold on now, what's going on here?" So I'm very intrigued to see how Florida State handles the game because again, I think that this is going to be all about what type of attitude do they come into this game with, right? That to me is more important than anything because the talent, it's a mismatch in talent. It just is, with all due respect to Virginia. The question is, what is Florida State going to come into this game with their mind on? Are they coming in with our mind on, we need to whoop the wheels off Virginia every play? Or are they thinking, yeah, we that Carson Beck kid over there, we got to find a way to, that Bain kid, he's been tearing up some offenses. We gotta find a way to block him. Well, Bain ain't walking out that tunnel this week.
I think I may have gotten one of those. I guess we're back down to 6 keys because I guess they had the bye the week before Florida State, so they're not coming off the bye. I had my bye weeks mixed up, so I know we're getting like Florida State comments are like the Miami guy doesn't know when our bye week is. My apologies, And actually, all right, the line for this game has moved a little bit. Florida State at the time we're recording this, the Seminoles are favored by 6.5 points. It started the week as 7.5, which would have made me probably take a shot on Virginia. I think Florida State will win this game by a touchdown. So like I'm not necessarily betting on it because I think it's going to be in that area, but I would lean to Florida State covering 6.5 and winning the game. I think it's going to be close for a while. I just think Florida State is going to have the athletes to close the game out. So what do you think, Kenton? You picking Florida State or Virginia?
Straight up Florida State against the spread Virginia. I think Virginia loses this game 34-28.
Okay. Wow.
Now, mind you, last week, the team that I said was going to win against the spread won outright. You know what I mean? They won outright. So, hey, just keep that in mind. You know, we may know a little bit of ball over here.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so there's other games we want to get into, including Georgia Tech at Wake Forest. Georgia Tech's ranked number 16. Duke at Syracuse is a really interesting game. Louisville at Pitt, same thing. And Virginia Tech at NC State. I feel like we're both going to be on the same page on that one, but I do want to pick Kenton's brain on it. And a scenario that should get 3 ACC teams in the college football playoff at the end of the year. You want to keep it locked. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Folks, this episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. Somebody who's been moving the game forward this season is star Syracuse receiver Justice Ross Simmons, who caught 2 more touchdowns against the Clemson Tigers in Syracuse's big win against Clemson, which kind of eliminated Clemson from the ACC championship conversation already. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out our other shows. Kenton Gibbs and Grayson Boone do an awesome job hosting Locked On Wolfpack, talking all things NC State. I host Locked On Canes, talking all things Miami. Clemson, and I believe SMU also all have bye weeks this week, so that kind of narrows the ACC slate a little bit. Number 16, Georgia Tech, is going to be on the road at Wake Forest. I know, Kenton, you probably have a little more insight on Wake since NC State has already faced them so far this year. Any reason why I shouldn't just believe that this is going to be an easy dub for Georgia Tech on the road? They're favored by 13.5, and I think Haynes King and company will cover that spread.
Yeah, no, there's no reason to not believe that. Wake Forest, I believe, has about 4 to 5 guys that are not accountants on that team, with all due respect. They've got about 4 to 5 guys that I could see, seriously having a shot at the NFL, and one of them is a true freshman, Mr. Barnes, their returner / slot receiver. He can absolutely go. I mean, he can fly. However, they've got a few problems. Number one, are they going to continue to trot out Robbie Ashford at quarterback? Because Robbie Ashford has been, he's had a few spots where you say, man, that's a big time throw. But other than that, it's been a whole lot of, wait, what? Wait, Robbie, explain to me like I'm 10 why that happened. So I think Georgia Tech, again, that physicality, it's really, really going to be a lot to overcome. Wake Forest also has a safety, number 45, by the name of Anderson. He's a gamer. He's a hitter, all that good stuff. He's the only one. He's the only one on that defense that I'm like, hey, that's a ball player that he could be playing on Sundays. He may be somebody's special teams demon next year. Other than that, I don't see any way for – I don't see a path to Wake for winning this game other than if Georgia Tech sleepwalks into this game. The problem with that is Georgia Tech don't have all of those markers to say like, hey, this is going to be a comedy of errors for a bunch of reasons. They have Virginia Tech after this, a Virginia Tech team that doesn't have a head coach. They don't have a rivalry game. They don't have all these things working against them where it's like, hey, there are reasons to overlook this Wake Forest team. And Brent Pry knows we have never been in a position where we're the hunted instead of the hunter. And even beyond that, even this year, they got jumped over by Florida State immediately. They won a big game. Florida State won a big game. They were ahead of Florida State, and then Florida State vaulted over them overnight. So it's even more fuel to throw on their fire to say, you see how the national media disrespects you. You'll see how nobody likes you. They think you're ugly. You're going to be the last kid picked on the playground. They've got even more fuel on that fire. So I see Georgia Tech taking care of this handily.
Yeah, if this game is closer than, 13 points. I would be surprised. Here's a game. By the way, that one is at 12 noon on Saturday. Another noon game on Saturday. I'll probably be paying closer attention to this one than the Georgia Tech Wake Forest game. Is Syracuse hosting Duke? So Duke are 4.5-point favorites in the JMA Wireless Dome at Syracuse. Now, I am really tempted to pick Syracuse to outright win this game at home. I'm just going to stick to leaning to Syracuse covers the spread, and the game comes down to a 3-point win in either direction. And the only reason why I have any hesitation, Kenton, I think the reason why the line is this way and the road team is favored is because Syracuse has the less certain quarterback. Steve Angeli, their starter, who was putting up big numbers, is out for the season with a torn Achilles. So they're turning to Ricky Collins, LSU transfer. Collins, by the way, was barely beaten out by Angeli for the starting job. If the quarterback competition was as close as Fran Brown led us to believe it was, Angeli barely beat out Ricky Collins. Syracuse has obviously a ton of talent on offense. They've been scoring points for fun so far this year. But the two reasons why I'm probably leaning to Duke winning this game by a field goal, Kenton, is because Duke, the running game is so important for them to set up the pass with Darian Mensah. And Syracuse's rushing defense has shown me some issues in some of their early games this year. And then, of course, the uncertainty of Ricky Collins starting at quarterback for Syracuse. For that reason, I'm going to lean to Duke to win this game by a field goal. But here's what I do feel pretty good about, Kenton. I think this game's going to be a shootout. I think both of these teams are going to score a lot of points. And the over-under at 59.5, I'm leaning to taking that over. I think the final score is going to be somewhere in the 60s, if not the 70s.
Give me that over. And give me Syracuse to win this football game. And let me tell you why. Duke has had a turnover against every single team they've played, including Elon, except NC State. Coach DJ Elliott, I'm looking at you right now. Anywho, this team has turned the ball over in every game except their one against NC State. Why is that important? The reality of this game, I think, is going to come down to who protects the ball better. And one thing that Fran Brown coach teams have been phenomenal at is protecting the ball and being opportunistic defensively. Even if they cannot get stops on a regular basis, they can take that ball away. They may get burnt going for it and being aggressive, but they're going to be aggressive and come up with one or two plays a game where you're like, oh, man, he jumped that thing like he knew it was coming. And then, boom, they're taking it the other way. I think those one or two plays are going to come in a critical enough moment for Syracuse to come away with a win in this one. Ladies and gentlemen, wrong team favored by Kenton Gibbs this week. Give me Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. Listen, her mama named the Carrier Dome. I'm going to call it Carrier Dome. I don't care about all this JMA nonsense and all that. Her mama called it Carrier Dome.
All right, so the next one, which is I think it's a great ACC matchup. The Louisville Cardinals are favored by 4.5 points on the road at Pitt. Pitt just they disappointed me losing the backyard brawl this year. I do think Louisville is one of the 4 best teams in the ACC, despite the fact that they haven't played the best competition so far. But this is a game I think is going to bring out the best in Louisville. The only question that I have, Kenton, is I still can't find a definitive injury status for Isaac Brown or Duke Watson. And if there's any Louisville fans watching this, if you know something that I don't, like you heard some update, Brown's going to play or they're both going to play, please let us know in the comments, because the last I checked, they were both considered questionable. So, I mean, if you fear the worst case scenario that Brown nor Watson plays in this game, the dynamic Louisville running back duo, then that could be the recipe for Syracuse's defense to cook something up, for Pittsburgh's defense to cook up something special en route to an upset win at home. But I'm just going to assume, with Louisville being the more talented team, I think Louisville's going to go into Pittsburgh, win, and probably cover that 4.5-point spread.
Yeah, I've been watching tape on this Pitt offense. That Holstein magic is gone. It just doesn't seem to be there anymore. Last year, everything that he was doing, he was hot as fish grease. Desmond Reed was rolling and cooking, and everything seemed good. This year, they've had breakdowns and protections. It seems like Holstein's a little gun shy to pull a trigger and all that, and it's just tough. But I will tell you this, that running back duo, they are special. If neither one of them are available, I worry for Louisville.
Yeah.
Because I know people say, oh, it's about the offensive line, not the running back. I don't think people understand how special these running backs are. If you watch that James Madison game, the play that Isaac Brown took to the house from like 70-something or 80-something yards out, that was not a play where it was like everything is blocked up perfectly. Right. All he's got to do is run. It was him pressing a hole and forcing the defense to commit. And then once they commit, boom, acceleration like nobody can keep up with. And then he breaks the tackle, gets out the gates, and you cannot catch him. I'm going to tell you, on College Football 26, I had both Isaac Brown and Duke Watson transfer into NC State. I was very excited about that as a head coach. That's
good for you.
I do work in the portal. But here's the deal, right? Those two playing, at least one of the two, is essential for this Louisville team to win. In the words of Tyler Creator, this game is getting sticky. I'm gonna stay away from it because I don't want to bet on this one if I don't know who's playing and who's not. I'm not touching nothing. Money line, under, over points. I ain't touching it unless I know that both or one of those backs is available.
Yeah, and like all that I know is a bunch of social media updates and a bunch of Google News searches say that they are both questionable. But maybe the fact that Louisville is favored by 4.5 on the road, maybe the odds makers think that at least one of those guys is going to play. So I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. All right. So Kenton, how about Virginia Tech at NC State? And so NC State favored by 10.5. I think that number should be bigger. And then also, if you want to throw in your take on Boston College favored by 5.5 at home against Cal. Had I not seen that San Diego State game last week, I'd be rolling into this matchup thinking wrong team is favored. Cal's going to go into Chestnut Hill and pull it off, but I don't know who Cal is anymore.
So let's start with the NC State Virginia Tech game. That is a rudderless ship at Virginia Tech. And if NC State comes out and puts them down early, they'll be done. That game will be over. We have seen this Virginia Tech team quit multiple times already this season. We saw it in the second half against Vanderbilt. We saw it early against ODU. Very, very early. This team said, all right, we're good. We're not really super interested in playing this game. So NC State, if they come out the right way, should put that team down early. If they don't, however, we could get us a Dave Doran special where we look at – I'm joking. That's not a Dave Doran special. This would be the worst loss of his tenure as head coach of the state. And trust me, I've been there since the first game. I was a part of his first recruiting class. So I can tell you that would be the worst loss in his tenure. Now, moving on to the next game on the slate here, I'm particularly interested in this Cal and Boston College game because I specifically said on Twitter when somebody asked me, hey, how good is JKS? I said, we will see now that teams have tape on him. There was three, because normally 3 games is the standard for understanding a pattern and what guys like and how guys get open and what patterns the quarterback likes to throw, which is something that I noticed amongst JKS. I was watching them and I said, seems like they're hitting some of the same stuff over and over and over. I wonder what's going to happen now that that's out. San Diego State came prepared for those things. This game is going to be about how does Cal adjust and bounce back. Talent-wise, I think Cal has a slight edge in talent. I really do.
They might.
But with that said, can JKS develop and progress enough to where now the teams know what you like to do and they want to counter that? Can you come up with a counter to their counter? Brian Harsin, people said that you ran all those players on the portal. It's time to earn your money, brother. It's time to show up and show out and protect your young QB from a Boston College defense where I give Bill O'Brien crap for a lot of things. But one thing I cannot give him crap for is the way that his defenses are prepared because he's not a defensive guy. He leaves that fully to his defensive coordinator and says, hey, y'all cook up the beef like 5 guys, and I'm going to let y'all do whatever y'all do over there, right? So the reality is I'm looking at this game and I'm saying to myself, it's about how well JKS responds. I'm not a betting degenerate. That is my co-host, Alex Donno. But if I were a betting degenerate, I'm always nervous about freshman quarterbacks, especially after their worst game of their career, because he could be a guy that rises to the occasion. JKS could also be a guy that sinks under the pressure and he falls to the quicksand effect where the harder you fight, the worse the struggle gets. So I'm intrigued by this game. I personally would stay away from it. However, I wouldn't be surprised by any outcome in this one.
Well, and I think another reason to lean to Boston College here is you mentioned Cal with their freshman quarterback as talented as he is. So their first time leaving the West Coast so far this season. They're going to be at BC. It's a 3:30 p.m. game, so that'll be, new 12:30 there. So it's not like a terrible time difference, but this will be the first time JKS, who's played 2 games at Cal, a game at Oregon State, and a game at San Diego State, will be his first time making that trip out east. So that's something to think about. Here's something to think about. If this scenario, which could very well play out, plays out, College Football Playoff Committee better be willing to put at least 3 ACC teams in the CFP at the end of the year. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Folks, it's time for this week's Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, this player delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. The guy who's been on a streak is Ruben Hurricane Bain of Miami. He delivered in a big way last week. 10 quarterback hurries against Florida, 7 tackles, a tackle for loss, a sack. When the pressure is on, Ruben Bain has come through in all 4 games this year. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching Bain week after week, you know that performance wasn't a fluke. Ruben Bain is on a streak. And just like Bain delivered for the Canes, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season. You could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period is through November 18th. We're also proudly brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Folks, caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take 5-Hour anywhere and get the boost when you need it. Guys, my favorite flavor for years has been grape. I start to feel the energy before I even open up the shot. I always reach for grape, but I want to get more adventurous, try some more flavors. And honestly, I love how fast 5-Hour kicks in and that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. All right, so Kenton, the wheels, the hamster wheel in my brain has been turning with ACC college football playoff scenarios, because we've talked a lot over the last week about how easy Georgia Tech's ACC schedule is the rest of the way. They should be favored in all of their remaining conference games. So there is a scenario where Georgia Tech runs the table in conference, but potentially, loses a non-conference game to Georgia at the end of the year. So let's say Georgia Tech is 11-1, 8-0 in the ACC. They get to the ACC championship game. Now, Miami and Florida State play each other next weekend. So that's at least one conference loss for whoever loses that game. If whoever wins that game runs the table 8-0 in conference, possible 12-0 this year, whoever loses that game goes 11-1, but misses out on the ACC championship game, Kenton. So there is a scenario where ACC championship game, you would likely favor either Miami or Florida State against Georgia Tech in an ACC championship game. So let's say Miami or Florida State beats Georgia Tech in an ACC championship. That team is 13-0. Georgia Tech is 11-2. And the team that missed out on the ACC championship game is 11-1 regular season. You've got to let all 3 of those teams in, right? Or does Georgia Tech possibly get left out in that scenario? But you shouldn't for a team that got to their conference championship game.
Well, who else would be in over them, right? You're looking at multiple teams.
Yeah, some 2-loss SEC team would with the committee's mindset probably.
And when you think about that, where does that 2-loss SEC team come from? I mean, with all due respect, you would have Alabama, who already has 1 loss. So if they go on to lose to Georgia this week, that gives them 2 losses before the 5th week of the season. And then what, or would you say it's a Georgia team? Would you say it's a Texas team that's already lost to Ohio State? And with all due respect, their quarterback is looking like an extra in one of those CW sports TV shows where they everything they do is sidearmed and janky and weird. If his last name was Jackson or Newton or Williams instead of Manning, people would be looking at him saying, get this bum off my field right now. Who else would you put in? Oh, a Penn State team that could be. I'll tell you this. Penn State has the opportunity to have one of the best resumes we've ever seen. They also have the opportunity to have 3 losses, 1 to Oregon this week, Ohio State coming up, and Indiana, who looks like a buzzsaw right now.
Yeah, Indiana looks good.
They could have 3 losses. Who are you putting in over these teams that we're saying, hey, you're looking at 2 loss, 1 loss teams? You're looking at a team that they may get their second loss in the conference championship. And are you going to punish them and say, no, we want you out? We want to put in the mighty whoever's because they play in a different conference. Because at that point, you're saying that the games don't matter. The games do not matter. The results to the games don't matter. What matters is the patch that you have right here on your shoulder to say what conference you're in. I'm not saying that all wins are created equally. I'm not saying that if the ACC proved itself across the board to just be god-awful and the SEC or the Big Ten virtually ran the table out of conference, at that point, you have to concede, hey, these teams have looked fantastic. We have looked like hot garbage. However, you're posing a situation where our big boys of the conference are playing like big boys. Yeah. You're posing a situation where that happens. And I'll do you one more. If Georgia Tech beats Georgia this year and goes undefeated regular season, I don't give a damn what they do in the ACC championship game. I don't care if they get blown out. I don't care. I don't care.
Same.
You're not going to tell me that team doesn't belong after all of those things happened. And they took them to 8 overtimes last year. So, I look at this as a situation where I say Georgia Tech deserves their respect. And I think that they're earning it the hard way. Okay, they're coming up on the rough side of the mountain. I love that for them. Miami earning their respect. Florida State earning their respect. If all 3 of these teams continue on this path, I don't see a world where they get left out.
And also, this is just a hypothetical. Like, I understand it might not necessarily be those 3 or just those 3, because I get it. Like, that scenario, it's completely sleeping on Louisville. They'll have their opportunity throughout the year. They're undefeated and they haven't played a conference game yet until this weekend. So they get it. Like, there are other teams that could get into this conversation. I'm just using that particular formula for argument's sake.
Yeah, and we're talking about this in week 4. So there's a ton of football ahead of us. We could have a situation where all 3 of these teams do look like juggernauts going forward, or all 4, including Louisville, do look like juggernauts going forward. We could have situations where a couple of these teams fall apart. And Donno and I have to get on the show and be honest and say, hey, you look great early in the season. The wheels have fallen off, okay? They're riding on the spokes. This looks nasty. This team barely belongs in the Micron Computer Bowl. They definitely don't belong in the playoff. That's a real possibility as well. But Donno and I are just saying, if these teams look good down the stretch, you have to give them their proper respect and due credence in that they have played phenomenally throughout the season, regardless of what the team name is. They've played a hell of a season and deserve to be in the playoffs because of it, despite whatever they would say about, you're not really one of the big 2 conferences or whatever the case may be.
Well, huge thank you to everybody for making Locked On ACC your first listen. Enjoy all the games this weekend. It starts tonight, Friday night, with Florida State on the road at Virginia. Big slate on Saturday as well. Make sure you follow Kenton at TGIF_Kenton on X. Make sure you check him out on Locked On Wolfpack. Check me out on Locked On Canes and at Alex Donno on X. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.